All right, here's Jerry. Now we can get started. So this is our second members meeting on Christianity from Annie Besant's book. Does anybody have any comment or insight that they would like to start with? Short comment. We're good? Okay, so then I'll just do kind of a quick review. Once again, to me, it's amazing when you read through the whole chapter, how at first what seems chaotic and all over the place seems to have a nice sequence. So Annie Besant started out with the limitations of Christianity and the divisions or the different sects of the church. She gives the history of the limitations and says kind of more or less that the reason that there are that the church isn't what it could be is because it lost its oral teachings, and in essence, losing those oral teachings or the occult part of Christianity for the mass. We understand that what we study is a little different, or even what we bring because of our past connection with whatever religion it was in our past lives. I think what we bring is a little bit more of a richness to even Christianity as we do it, but that it she kind of traces the downfall into the Dark Ages. And I'm sure it's not the only thing, but in general, because of the lack of these deep teachings and the all-encompassing or the widespread of the Christian faith. So it posed these superficial teachings to the masses, and which kind of led to the Dark Ages. If anybody knows anything more about that, please shout out, give a shout out.
Yeah, to a large extent, the Dark Ages were because the church was against intellectual activity. The idea was the works of God you cannot understand, you just have to have faith, and things were like the Bible said. So you don't need to do science, you don't need to do, all philosophy has to be about the Bible, and that led Europe to the Dark Ages.
Okay, and then she talked about the fathers, that these oral teachings came from the fathers of the church, and she gives Origen as one of them, and I believe she talked about Clement of Alexandria, right? And she calls Origen, though, the expositor of the mystical tradition of the church. And he says that the scriptures are threefold in meaning, that the body or the flesh of the teachings are for the simple. And I think too, in some place she said, I don't know, simple and the ignorant. And I don't think that was as we use the word ignorant today, as a judgment. I think it was just more of a statement there. So, or its true meaning of unknowing. And then the spirit or the soul was for the more instructed, and the spirit was for the perfect or the prefect, those that studied more. Wisdom of God.
And the flesh would be the literal meaning. The soul, I think it was the parables and the symbolic, and then the spirit was the mystical meaning.
Or the oral teachings. Yeah. Okay. Once the oral and secret teachings were lost, the church was weakened. So that's all I have, like as a segue into today. And I believe we can start on page 159 in my book. It's 160 in Pablo Maniti's book. And we're starting with the paragraph that says, now as we look at that figure, which has fascinated so many hearts. Give a thumbs up when you find where we're at. I mean, when we're all at the same place. All right. Okay. We'll go ahead then. I'll just read the paragraph, the whole thing. Now, as we look at the figure which has fascinated so many hearts, round which the love and adoration of generation after generation of the Western world has twined, let us try to realize the work that he had to do, the mission he was intended to fulfill. A new civilization was to be born. A new chapter was to be written in the life of the world. Young nations full of vigor and energy, with the metaphysical intellect less developed than the more practical side of the mind, with coming to the front, and were gradually assuming the reins of the destinies of the world. A strong and vigorous people, full of vitality, full of practical ability, was the type from which the nations of Europe were to be born. Okay, and so what she's talking about here and in the next paragraph is the goal or the aim of the great brotherhood, who are guardians of the spiritual evolution of man. So this was as we know, this was their impetus in choosing Jesus. And they say a little bit later in the page that Jesus, he was chosen as their fit instrument and messenger as a young man already marked out by a marvelous purity and by a profound devotion. This was Jesus, known later as the Christ. Okay, then they talk about
HPV also mentions Jesus as one of the purest of the adepts or something like that. She says she mentions his purity as a defining character of Jesus.
So do we know anything about Jesus's incarnation before he became Jesus?
No, I don't think so.
Does anybody? Okay, I was just wondering. So then it says that his mission began at the point in his life described as his baptism at the age of 30. The Spirit of God came down upon him, and he was proclaimed by a voice from heaven as the Son of God. And this is where she starts her occult teachings, or to present the occult teachings. From the occult point of view, this was the allegorical way in which the messenger of the teaching was chosen, and represents the enlightenment that descended on him, which made him fit to be a divine teacher of men. Okay. He taught for 3 years, doing the miracles that men called, that we know are really just manipulations of nature, or the energies of nature. Do you call it a manipulation? Is there a better word? Yeah. So she says that this is not surprising to the occultists, that all these miracles can be explained. She says that these so-called miracles were wrought by the use of certain hidden powers of nature that brought about certain external results. The miracles of healing, restoring sight, yada, yada, yada. And she does say here that Jesus took the miracles lightly, and quotes, greater works than these shall ye do, because I go unto my Father. So any comments about what's so far, or going after that if someone found something in the next couple paragraphs and wants to start?
HPV also mentions that some of the apostles were able to perform these kind of miracles. And then, of course, was Simon the Magus. No. The Apollonius of Tyana, who also was able to do these miracles, but he didn't get along with the apostles, so they attacked him.
Isn't Apollonius of Tyana who they say Jesus might have been, or who?
I think what HPV says is that there is a mix. Some things that they claim about Jesus was really about Apollonius, and they got mixed up because they were very similar, Jesus and Apollonius, in many ways.
Okay. Oh, I was going to ask, did the apostles do these miracles before or after Jesus died?
No, afterward.
Okay. So he goes, he declared them, these miracles, to be signs of men who had living faith in him. They belong to all initiates who choose to exercise the power. The life of Jesus was a beautiful one. These teachings are exactly at one with the precepts of the great spiritual teachers who preceded him. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. This is the occult truth, that only by purity can the pure be seen. Only by the purified can God be known. See how he enforces the teaching that thought is more important than action, that thought is, in fact, action practically done. Then she goes on. I liked this part. She goes on and says, or take the teaching so familiar in the teachings of Manu, Zoroaster, and the Buddha. Love your enemies, blessing them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you, and pray for them that despitefully use you and persecute you, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. And I thought that's a very practical work to do every day. You could do that your whole life. This work right here, what he says, love your enemies,
Yeah, I think that example of God makes rain, fall upon the just and the unjust. It reminds me of the idea of be just a force of nature, impersonal force of nature, like the rain.
Or the sun.
Yeah.
The sun, isn't there one, the sun shines equally on the cement as it does on the grass?
Yeah.
I think also, she talks about that the teachings, thought is more important than action, but I think in these things, it is your action, because you can think, but you have to act on it. And that, I think, is the hardest part, being able to act on something, to love your neighbor, and show that intention, be that intention, act that intention. So I think it goes, to me, it's actually, action is more intense than thought, because first you think it, then you have to try to act it.
Yeah, it could be harder to do.
Yeah, I think maybe part of what Besant was trying to point out is that if we act the right way, but our intentions are not right, then that action is not very important. So in that sense, the thought is more important, but at the level of practice, as you say, if the thought is just a thought, then
right. That was yeah, I'm glad you said that, Dana, because I was thinking it the other way, as Pablo said. Difficult it is. I can act nice to people or whatever, but are my thoughts really nice? So that's good.
Yeah. Sometimes.
Yes, Pablo.
Michelle, uh, talking about the miracles, Jesus was training with the essence for a few years, and there were most about to teach healing and other kinds of called miracles. So it's not like a overnight Jesus become to healing and miracles and things. Also, some of the called miracles are allegorical. It's not just the, let's say, uh, with stones he did bread, transform and bread. It's some allegorically. So we cannot take everything literally, but we can think of the philosophy or ethics, the um, what is the Sermon on the Mountain, and or the Ten Commandments. So I think there are very interesting parts in the ministry of Jesus for 3 years. But they say 3 years. Then they say he did at 33 years. But also maybe that is allegorically.
Right.
And then he disappeared. After the crucifixion, he disappeared.
I thought I read in the earlier in the chapter that after the crucifixion, he came back for 10 years just to teach his inner group, the apostles.
Yes, is a lot of talk about what happened with Jesus after that. Many people say he went to India or to Egypt, and also he say he married, has a lot of kids, but it's no conclusive history. Over.
Yeah. Like you said about the miracle, the loaves and the fishes, that I had heard it told in a way that when people went out to listen to these speakers, which it seems like that was the thing to do, to get on their soapbox. So when they went out for the day, they carried bread and dried fish in their cloaks that they wore, so in the deep pockets or the deep hood of it, and they carried it there. So when they were at the seaside and Jesus was speaking and they passed around the basket of bread or the basket to fill it, it seems like mostly you would fill it just with a small crumb so that you make sure you have enough eat. And to me, the miracle was that Jesus spread this basket around, and people so loved him or trusted him that they were able to take out all their food and give it. And then by the end, seeing that there were, is it 1,000 loaves and fishes or thousands of loaves and fishes? So there was more than enough for everybody to eat from. So I've heard it that way, and I really liked that telling of the miracle. Okay, so listen to his proclamation of that ancient narrow path, the path that the Hindus know to be as sharp as the edge of the razor. Straight is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Okay. Okay, here he has it talks about it. This is those were examples of his compassion. And then I guess some of his disciples were chasing the mothers away that brought their children to be close to Jesus. And he says, suffer little children and forbid them not to come unto me, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. There was a sterner side that insisted, again on the lines of ancient occult teaching, about the attachment to things of the earth is fatal to progress in the life of the spirit. Keep the commandments, all these things have I kept from my youth up. What lack I yet? This was someone speaking to Jesus. Then if thou wilt be perfect, go and sell that thou hast and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven, and come and follow me. The young man went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. Okay, so yeah, he talks about the rich. The parables contain a gem of spiritual truth. He talks about the story of the lost sheep. Okay, then she gives a summary. Thus Jesus passed 3 brief years in teaching, in healing, in helping all who were in need. The summary in life was given by St. Peter. He went about doing good. His life was a short one because the people to whom he came were fierce, fanatical, harsh, and bigoted. There could be but one result. They invoked their own stern law of blasphemy and slew him out of hatred and malice.
Was that a quote from Peter?
The quote from Peter is, yeah, was just he went about doing good. And then the rest is Annie Besant's comment. So here, sometimes men ask why the masters remain hidden, why they refuse to show themselves in the haunts of men. The answer is that until men relearn the ancient veneration, which made the messenger of the gods a sacred person and surrounded him with love and reverence, the masters of the wisdom do not come forth to stimulate the angry passions of men. The Christ was the last of these great messengers, sent into the world, and they to whom he came slew him when 3 years of public life were over. They hated him for a purity that seemed to them as an insult offered to their own impurity, and for a greatness that was a reproach to their pettiness.
Of course, this was more of a, because this was more of a cultural thing in the sense that, you know, part of the anti-Semitism in the West is because of the idea that the Jewish people killed Jesus. But then the Christians did exactly the same with, you know, an enormous amount of people. They killed the Neoplatonists, especially Hypatia, and then later on. So it's not a question of, you know, what ethnicity or religion. It was obviously, you know, at that part of the world at that time, it was in that state of consciousness.
The gospel of love and compassion spread swiftly among the poor, more slowly among the educated by means of esoteric teaching, and we see a great effort made by the brotherhood during the 3 centuries after Christ's death. So even though after Jesus left, the brotherhood was still, the great brotherhood seems to be still around to give some energy for 100 years. after Jesus.
Okay.
Yeah, and this we know. There was a struggle between learning and ignorance, between knowledge and superstition. It raged strongly and fiercely, having for its chief center Alexandria. Has anybody, have you guys seen the show about Hypatia? What's it called?
Agora?
Agora. I mean, it's really sad about Hypatia, but I learned a lot in the setting of the time. I didn't understand it quite so much.
Where did you see that?
It was a regular movie for a while.
With Rachel Weisz.
Yeah, I'm sure it's on Netflix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when Plato was born among, these people there in the Mediterranean, he already was talking about the Roman Empire, the declination, the decline, and, all the assassinations that were going on there in the Roman Empire. And that was a few hundred years before Jesus. So that part of the world was going into a down cycle, which ended up in the Dark Ages.
So then she talks about Valentinus wrote his Apocalypse of Wisdom, which I thought was a very interesting term.
Apocalypse really means revelation. We now we use it like for the end of times, because in the Revelation there is an account of the end of times. But apocalypse just means revelation.
Right, because I looked it up and it said complete destruction. So I thought the complete destruction of wisdom, but anyway, the Pistis Sophia. Can you talk about the Pistis Sophia for a minute? Doesn't Blavatsky?
Yeah, Valentinus or Valentinus, I don't know how you say in English. He was a Gnostic, and I think it was him that almost got to be a pope at the time when the pope was chosen by people raising their hands, maybe a handful of people. I think there were 100, 200 people, and he lost for very few votes. So I can't imagine what the church would have been if Valentinus would have won. But he was a Gnostic, and Blavatsky said that the Pistis Sophia was a very occult book, and she published some comments on the Pistis Sophia that are, I think, in Collected Writings 13, I think they are. G.R.S. Smith did a translation, if I remember correctly.
Yep. Annie Besant says here, the greatest treasure of ancient Christian occultism, now made known to the English-speaking world by the translation of G.R.S. Mead, the secretary of the European section of the TS. Okay. So,
but Michelle,
yes.
that Pistis Sophia, which is included in volume 12 from Blavatsky, and she explained, and I try to read to assimilate it, but it's really difficult for me to understand all whatever is there. So Pistis Sophia is also the one who the secretary of Blavatsky put into English, and that we have, which is the Gnostic view of the Pistis Sophia, or the religion. So we should go to all of this material and read, because I think I cannot follow you. Try to see what page you are, and maybe you read lines and go to the next page or something like that.
In my book, it's 176. Pablo, it may check there. Yes, she has been moving very quickly and around. But if you
Once-
have the old book, one of the older ones, we're now on 176.
Yeah,
and in the page 170.
right. Do you see, are you there with Pistis Sophia?
Yes, now I'm here.
Okay.
But it's beautiful if we can have a go to all these reference and think about it. And because the life of Jesus is very rich, but also all the context, the history. And it's another good book if we try to get more religion and what is the hidden wisdom. There is a nice book from Ravi which called The Yoga of Christ. Very, very interesting. Very nice.
From
So,
Ravi Ravindra?
Ravi Ravindra, The Yoga of Christ. So I really enjoy this extra information because of what Annie Besant does is give a lot of quotation, and we cannot get, I mean, this is maybe some kind of pre-knowledge, and then we go and study more by ourselves. But I think it's, the history of that time is so rich in events, even with the called fathers of the church. It's very important to see what they did, how they did, and why they did things which we now think they were happen because the church was built in their view. Some of the fathers, they don't even know how to write or read. So we get all of this build of the church. But I think most for me is that part of, I don't say hidden, but more heart expression of the teaching of Jesus. That's what I say. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Blavatsky also mentions the works of, oh, somebody was
Yeah.
going.
Susan, go
Sorry.
ahead.
Sorry.
I can talk first. No
That's
You're
problem.
fine, go ahead.
Well, reading the Pistis Sophia is like trying to read the Secret Doctrine. You know, some people can plow through it, but most people can't. But Jeffrey Hodson has the Hidden Wisdom in the Holy Bible. I think it's 2 volumes. It's beautiful, very nice, and talks a lot about the symbolic language. I really enjoyed reading those, and certainly St. Francis and Clare and their story is quite lovely. And you know, there's other very heartfelt sources that we could look at. We could also look at Hildegard of Bingen and St. Teresa of Avila, and you know, there's many mystics that have, I don't know, a little, Annie Besant goes very deep, but and I haven't unpacked my book, so I apologize. I have no idea where my book is right now, so I can't read it. But I mean, I could probably go online, so there's maybe no excuse. But
No, you can't. So you're okay. Not online.
I have a book somewhere. I have probably several copies, but I wouldn't know where at this moment.
But
So,
I think
anyway.
that's the idea, though. The idea, or sorry, that was the idea that I was thinking, is that, you know, to use Annie Besant as a jumping off point, and then each of us finds the flavor that we like in Christianity and bring what we know, if it's from one of the Christian mystics or, you know, from somewhere, to bring that into the discussion. So I guess it's a little late in the year to explain that, but that was what I was thinking that people would do. So
like Simon Blavatsky says that the teachings of Simon Magus are very similar to the secret doctrine or the esoteric philosophy. And in the esoteric teachings, she does a whole analysis of some of his teachings. And I think Mead wrote a book about the teachings of Simon Magus. So that's another source of information, Christian information that is not very common. And that's more about the cosmology and the eons, the angels, and the different planes. It's more like the secret doctrine in that way.
Okay. Oh, and there's always Annie Besant's book about
Esoteric Christianity.
esoteric Christianity. That's a good book too. So from here, she just starts talking about kind of the decline. Mead writes in his introduction, let us then consider the movement about the year AD 150. And in 48 BC, the Alexandrian library burned. So that was, kind of one of the downfalls. The original Logia, or do you know these words? Evangelium of Christianity had disappeared. And the synoptic gospels were all set in the framework of the traditional life of the great master of faith. The popular tidal wave of the new religion had come exclusively from the ocean of Jewish tradition and was engulfing a more universal view of Christianity in the same flood of intolerance and exclusiveness which had characterized the Hebrew nation throughout the whole of its previous history. The startling phenomenon was now attracting the attention of minds which were not only skilled in philosophy of the schools, but also imbued with the eclectic spirit of a universal theosophy and a knowledge of the inner doctrines of the ancient religions. Such men thought that they saw in the Christian gospel a similarity of doctrine and a universalism which was consanguous, with these inner teachings of the ancient faith, and set to work to endeavor to check the exclusive and narrowing tendencies which they saw so rapidly developing among the less instructed, who made faith superior to knowledge, even to such an extent as to openly condemn every other form of religion and scoff at all philosophy and education. So I'm assuming here he's talking about the Gnostics or the Neoplatonists.
Yeah, the Gnostics, I mean, because at the beginning, the Christian theology was very different and diverse. Even St. Paul didn't believe in the physical reincarnation of Jesus. He says it in one of the letters. And the Gnostics had a very different view. They hardly ever talked about the crucifixion and the resurrection. But then, yeah, when they chose the 4 Gospels and all of that, they chose only the Gospels that were more historical about the life of Jesus, and they left all the Gnostic Gospels aside. And that's when it became more narrow. And then they started persecuting all the Gnostics and Neoplatonists.
There's a really beautiful book called Blessed Among Women. And that was about the life of Mary and her life with the Gnostics and the Carmelites. This is a really pretty, really lovely book.
Today, even scholars agree that there was probably some kind of mystery school associated to Christianity, the mystery of the kingdoms of heaven. And that also seemed to have disappeared because that was part of the esoteric undercurrent. And I don't know if there is any historical record of when that disappeared. There are no many records except people talking about it.
Well, on the Dead Sea Scrolls that are being discovered.
Those are about the Gnostic Gospels and teachings. But in addition to that, there was a mystery school, which we don't know what they taught there. But it was a mystery school, probably like the others, with some ritual and some symbolism and things like that, where more esoteric teachings were taught. But we know about it only by reference of a few early Christians, and nothing survived.
Do you think it's because we're not ready? So it stays hidden because, humanity isn't ready for it?
At the time, I think what Annie Besant, suggests here is that it was the decline of that, that culture, that area. And this was just because they were in the down cycle, so all that disappeared.
But I thought that though the idea of the TS, the Theosophical Society, was kind of like to breathe new light into these religions that had taken the decline. Hinduism and its superstition, and Buddhism, which was no longer taught. So that would go for Christianity also.
Mhm.
So.
I wonder if we're just meant to be a bridge that holds on to the knowledge so that when it's time, it comes forward in a way that people can understand and are ready to assimilate. They might have to go through this Kali Yuga first.
Yeah.
Jerry?
Hi. Is my little signal worked?
Well, this one, it was that you turned on your video, so I figured.
Yeah, I have something to share on this topic from an article that was published in Concord Grove Press's Gospel According to Thomas. And I think it was written by Eldon Hall, actually. But it's called the Gnostic Transmission. And in it, he writes, "The Gnostic mysteries were an embarrassment to the church, for it wished to win over the uncultured masses on the one hand and become a political force on the other. Its bid for popularity and power left little room for the doctrine of truth through renunciation, universal love, and mutual toleration. The desire to be influential in the world prevented its bishops from taking up the quiet and arduous path of inner transformation. By the time of Clement of Alexandria, the tension between those who knew, or at least sensed, the mysteries and those who were building a new empire had become severe. Clement himself was torn between the loyalty to the small core of initiates and an attraction to making converts in vast numbers. He could not bring himself to risk losing either. Hence, he could neither stem the tide against the Christian gnosis nor wholeheartedly give himself to dogma. His vacillation cost him both Gnostic support and posthumous Christian sainthood. The church's claim to be the unique possessor and guardian of wisdom was utterly unacceptable to the Gnostics within and outside its fold. This insult to the beneficence of nature and blasphemy against the sacred names of the masters of wisdom in every race and time were vigorously challenged by the Gnostic movement. The church declared Gnostics heretics and embarked on a program to revise history to suit its purposes."
And who was that book by again? Was that book by a theosophist? Nope.
This is Concord Grove Press republished the Gospel According to Thomas and included a variety of articles kind of as introductory. And this one's called the Gnostic Transmission. And I believe it's written by Eldon Hall.
Got it. Thanks. Okay, so I'm on page 169 in my book, just past the talk about mead, and then we can go on to the doctrines for the time that's left. But to wrap this up, the church emerged from this struggle with enough of true religion left to train and elevate the heart. but not enough to justify to the intellect the wisdom of the ages. It brought out of the struggle its devotion to the personal Christ, the man God, who was the object of its most passionate and most fervent worship. In that revelation of the divine, there was enough that was wanted for the heart, but there was not enough for the stimulation of the intellect, for the training of the philosophical mind. And I think any of us recovering Catholics will, our love of the church lasted for so long. And then, at least for me, when I needed more, it wasn't there. I couldn't
You
find
needed
it.
more answers.
Right. Sorry. Yeah, needed
Mhm.
more answers. Okay. On page 170 in my book, today within the church, a nobler school growing up, more liberal in its thinking. Well, I guess this is 200 years ago or so. More charitable in its views of others, as we may hope that this will redeem Christianity and give it its rightful place among the religions of the world. All right, so now she talks about the doctrines, and the first one is the Trinity. Does anybody have any comments? Of this, there is curiously little said in the Bible.
A lot of the doctrines are not really in the Bible. The idea of the Trinity, it's not really there.
When did they come about, Pablo?
The church fathers are the ones that began to develop the theology. The idea is, again, that all this was oral tradition that was being taught in the mystery schools, and that the church fathers were creating documents to share that with the general public. Then when the Reformation came and the Protestants got rid of all of that, and then they stuck mainly to what the Gospels say, then they got rid of all those teachings that are supposed to be esoteric.
Okay, so on page 171, Annie Besant says here, there was much debate in the early church over the doctrine, this is the Trinity, which was further complicated by the deification of Jesus into the second person. But ultimately, it emerged from the struggle in a form recognizable as the ancient doctrine. The Father is the existence, the source of all life. The Son is begotten by, emanated from him, dual in his nature, God and man with the mark of duality, which is always the mark of the second logos, or the second person in the Trinity, by whom the worlds were made and without whom nothing can be made in the manifested universe. More indefinitely, the third person is the Holy Spirit, the universal mind or wisdom. So what you're saying and what this is saying is that was there. They took it out or ignored it.
Yeah, again, that probably the Trinity was probably taught in a more esoteric way in the mystery schools, but then when you have to explain it to the masses, it's difficult to do. There was this idea, some people even today think of the God, Jesus, and the Holy Ghost or Spirit really as three different gods, even though they say they are three different persons and one God. Most people cannot conceive that.
Okay, next, and I'm not exactly sure what this is, so any help, just jump in. On page 172, she talks about the divine substance is said to be one. Believers are warned that as they must not confound the persons of the Trinity, neither must they divide the substance, the unity which underlies the three, the unity of which the three are the manifestations.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. that they are supposed to be of one substance, three persons, but the same substance, in the sense, substance, more in the philosophical sense. There is only one God manifesting in three different ways. But that's a thought that most...
Well, it says here, a Roman Catholic theologian points out that the word person comes from persona, a mask. And this implies that behind the mask, there is the unrevealed reality, the hidden, unknown God. Okay. The next,
Oh, no, I thought somebody wanted...
sorry. The next paragraph, she talks about the seven spirits. Then coming downwards from the Trinity, we have the seven spirits before the throne of God. These are the seven great gods of the elements, familiar in Hinduism, so far as five of them are concerned. They are the lower gods, the archangels and angels, then those of whom St. Paul speaks as angels, principalities, and powers. Of these are 9 orders, and those are the 9 orders in the Kabbalah.
Again, that's nowhere in the Gospels.
Right.
And so where did Paul...
Well, it says, oh, you're asking,
No.
where did he get that?
Cherubim, seraphim,
Yeah.
Right.
thrones, dominations, princedoms, kingdoms, powers,
Virtues.
virtues. Yeah, left out virtues. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In the Roman Catholic Church, there is quite rightly the worship of angels, that is, of the lower gods who have to do immediately with man and with the manifestations of nature.
So all these angels have functions that, again, are not known normally. And some of them are related to the continents, some other are related to different aspects of the earth and humanity. But in Christianity in general, it's very vague. I don't know that anybody knows what they do.
So where do people study this now?
I don't think they do. I don't think they do. I mean, there is Dionysius the Areopagite. He's a Christian mystic, and he describes all these orders in his book. But I don't know that, except in seminary for the priests.
Well, that's Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jim.
Well, Jeffrey Hotz's book, Kingdom of the Gods, is a good place to look for that information about the different categories of angels and what they're involved with.
But I think
Maria has a book too on angels.
Say it again, Adele.
Maria,
Yes, the book that Maria published.
right.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Susan, you were asking regular Christians where they can learn this?
Well, regular Christians, like as in fundamental Christians, aren't really interested, but I'm wondering, the mystery schools, I don't think they really die. I just think they go underground.
Mm-hmm.
And if you knew where to look, you might find them. So I'm wondering where to look.
You might say that they find you.
Yes, that could be true. Pablo Minetti.
No, the Christians don't look on this information like the Jews don't look to study the Kabbalah.
Mm-hmm.
The information is there, but that's why we in the Theosophical Lodge, we study these things because it's part of knowledge, part of the history. But there is, in the church, they don't teach to the regular people, for the seminary or for other things maybe. But this is our interest as a theosophist, to acquire more knowledge and reach perfection to all of these studies, I think.
In general, in all religions, you have the masses that they don't study. They just follow the rituals and the beliefs that they are told, whether it is Hinduism or Buddhism, etc. but most religions have some place where those interested can go and learn all of this. In Christianity, it's really hard. If anybody wants to learn about this, you don't have this very accessible.
And that was one of the main callings of the Theosophical Society, was to keep this study alive.
Mhm.
So probably another way to answer her question is, where do people go to study these things? At Theosophical circles.
Oh, okay.
Today, I think the people are more inclined to look for other source of knowledge, for more spiritual, for everyday life. So we, as individual, I think we can aspire to study the 4 volumes of Geoffrey Hudson, which is the hidden wisdom of the Bible. And it's beautiful things about the parables of the prodigal son and other stories. It's beautiful. It's like you read the work of Hercules or all the mythological stories. This is what it is history. And we don't going to be much better in studying and discuss these things. So the people today look, the regular people, I mean, citizens who struggle to live, to find purpose in life, they look for this more spiritual way. So you can find many people ask me, or anybody say, you read the Imitation of Christ? You read Cloud of the Unknown? You read Saint Teresa of Avila? These kind of things, because they are more to transcend the human limitation and get to more transcendental, become a more human, more humble, more of service to humanity. I think that this is what it is. This is history. Like all the history, we don't look on the history, and we are history too. Over.
Thank you. I thought the mystery schools were more on the inner planes, that you weren't going to find them. You know, isn't that what jnana yoga is about? You know, taking this knowledge or this intellect and using it through meditation to find the mysteries. So it's 8 o'clock. So last comments or anything?
Well, the angels don't just belong to Christianity. They're universal.
Humanity. So what happened to the speaker that you were bringing in?
I'll talk about that after we stop recording.
Yeah.
So any last comments? Okay, all right.